Good morning to the participants in this webinar in the United States. Good evening to those in Taiwan, and good afternoon to the European participants in this webinar about the rule of law and the Tai Ji Men case. Taiwan, a democratic country, claims to be founded on the respect for the rule of law. In a democracy, citizens must be able to rely upon a judiciary that is independent, on a legislature that respects fundamental rights, and on an executive that abides by its own rules. Respect for these basic principles forms the basis of democracy and should be its central value. For years and decades, the rule of law in Taiwan has been under threat of a specific state organ, the National Taxation Bureau, which undermines the efficiency of the judiciary. What is at stake in the case of Tai Ji Men is the system of bonuses by which there is a conflict of interest, leading to the overcollection of taxes and even the fabrication of tax evasion cases. This is an obvious abuse of power for private financial gain and a pyramidal scam as officials at all levels pocket winnings. The beneficiaries of this rotten system are the Ministry of Finance, the National Tax Bureau, and the Enforcement Agency. Noteworthy is that this bonus system, which is a product of the martial law era, has no legal basis. But a fund is budgeted for this system every year. Businesses are often coerced by tax officers to pay some unjustified taxes, and some tax officers would even conduct malicious tax audits for the sake of bonuses. In a number of cases, including the Tai Ji Men case, the enforcement agency would forcibly auction the property of individuals, companies, or non-profit making associations, although they don't owe any tax. Last but not least, issuing a so-called wrong tax bill is not punishable by internal sanctions or by law. Comprehensive legal reforms are needed to address the lack of transparency and accountability in this agency. We want to advocate for the respect for the rule of law in Taiwan in a constructive way. We have already made recommendations to the Taiwanese authorities that were based on the analysis of Tai Ji Men's case, a former judge, and also lawmakers. With CESNUR, the Center for Studies and New Religious Movements, we have raised awareness among human rights organizations, political and academic circles about the damage caused by the National Taxation Bureau to the rule of law in Taiwan. This information campaign of the international community through publications, seminars, and conferences will go on as long as a solution has not been brought to the problem of Tai Ji Men. And it is in this perspective that we are holding this webinar today. First, there will be a video which will show, or at least which will give you and us the idea to hear the voices of scholars from the 19th of December event.
Such ridiculous indictment can be taxed by the Taxation Bureau, NTB? On one hand, it says it is illegal income from fraud. On the other, it says it is illegal income from cram school. That's insane. The unlawful income would be confiscated, then lawful income could not be unlawful. The indictment is filed with the so-called fraudulent tax evasion, which is illegal. Then it calls it fraudulent, qigong religious fraud, and then fraudulent indictment. Isn't this inexplicable? Is it legal tuition income or illegal fraud? This is self-contradictory. Regarding this illegal indictment, this case with the income type unclear, shouldn't the NTU wait until the criminal court confirms before you bill tax? In the end, the tax bills were issued according to the untrue contents of the indictment. 6 years of tax bills were issued at once. From the establishment of Tai Ji Men in 1966 to now, there were no tax problem except for the period between 1991 and 1997, when Ho Quan Zhen illegally indicted. Is this logical? This is an unjust case derived from the illegal tax case. This is a tax case that never should have existed. The tax bill is so ridiculous and unreasonable that even when the criminal case is solved for 10 years and 7 months, why hasn't our tax authority solved the tax case for 25 years, from 1997 to now? If the people of Taiwan can tolerate this kind of unwarranted tax bill in Taiwan's society, this means we allow tax authorities to treat every citizen with this kind of illegal actions. Tai Ji Men has insisted for 25 years, not that the persecution it has suffered must be vindicated, but that it is insisting on truth and justice. Even today, it is insisting on pursuing taxpayers' human rights, that no one in Taiwan should be treated this way by the government, not just Tai Ji Men. The tax authorities have already admitted their own mistakes, and zeroed the tax bills for FY 1991 and FY 1993 to FY 1996, but only for FY 1992 have they hidden evidence, forged documents, hidden correspondence checklist and favorable evidence, and deceived the administrative court to make the illegal decision. The judges of the administrative court even asked the Central NTB to calculate like the other years. If 1992 is the same, they should withdraw the execution. It's so clear. A letter was issued to the Central NTB, as well as the Administrative Enforcement Agency, but they're performance-oriented. And what is this? Greed. So we, the people of Taiwan, should not allow this unjust case of Tai Ji Men to continue to exist. We should come together to vindicate, to pursue justice and righteousness for Taiwan. The government's unlawful administrative execution, unlawful administrative auction, and unlawful administrative tax bill swallow people's property, which should be returned to the people so that Taiwan can have real justice, righteousness, and real taxpayers' human rights.
The Tai Ji Men taxation case was a clear example of injustice and falsehood. After an extended period, in the end, the land belonging to the Tai Ji Men was auctioned off by the Administrative Enforcement Agency. However, it was not auctioned off to the general public but to the state itself. To be clear, the performance bonus through the auction was divided and distributed. This is unreasonable. We have to continue to protest at Katagalan Boulevard. We will continue to voice out so that our president can hear about these wrongdoings. We have to ensure our president acknowledges these wrongdoings, these sufferings of the people, and the many experts and scholars who are supporting Tai Ji Men, and all the people who are suffering as a result of tax injustice. In the last 25 years, one might agree that Tai Ji Men could have negotiated with the NTB to pay a small amount of tax. But Dr. Hong insisted on justice and righteousness with a clear distinction between right and wrong. For 25 years, he has led his Dizi to fight tirelessly against such tyranny. The Tai Ji Men case happened in 1996. It is the year Taiwan transitioned to full-fledged democracy, from dictatorship with its first direct vote presidential election. Unfortunately, it was also the beginning of our disastrous tax case. Legacies of the authoritarian regimes have a lasting impact on Taiwan's culture and constitution even to this day. So we are very grateful to Bitter Winter magazine from Italy for speaking righteously about the Tai Ji Men tax case in Taiwan. Their discussion on the related legal principles in both English and Italian bring this case in Taiwan to the attention of our international friends, helping them to understand this case, bringing out the problem with democracy, human rights, and rule of law in Taiwan. There are many other cases besides the Tai Ji Men case, that are the result of the 1996 crackdown, cases involving persecution of new religions, and subsequent tax issues. They have not been resolved to this day. The DPP is now the majority party in Congress. Why is there no progress in these taxation cases? Instead, they are complacent that the government's tax revenue has been rising steadily in recent years. It might seem like a great governance achievement, but it is not. If taxation is constantly depriving the people of their property, it would be a great shame. It is a government of robbers and thieves. It is not the democratic government that protects human rights and rule of law. Therefore, we hope that we can all work together with the support from the international community and help Taiwan along with its democratization progress and redress the Tai Ji Men case. The charges must be revoked or cancelled when applied the wrong law and regulation. The dispositions are invalid from the beginning. I stated the same point last year. The court ruling is also the same. But there has been no response for the past year. So I assume my statement tonight will not be properly treated too. Using non-recognizable income that is fake and consists of randomly made up numbers violates tax treatment. On the basis of economics theories, accounting principles, income tax laws and business tax laws. Extrajudicial disposition is in fact invalid. Based on Section 3 to 7 of Article 111 of the Administrative Procedure Act, the tax disposition should be voided. These two invalid dispositions even bothered related tax and legal personnel for so long. It is obvious that the judge did not read the Administrative Procedure Law, and the Ministry of Justice even refused to revoke the invalid tax disposition, which overpowered the right to redress among 5 ministries and laws. The Administrative Enforcement Agency also illegally implemented confiscation and became the culprit for delaying the progress of Taiwan's democracy and rule of law for 25 years. There are no heroes in governing a country, and a country should be governed by the laws. If the Tai Ji Men case is legally treated by the National Taxation Bureau's agents, it will not result in falsified cram school income of 3.2 billion NTD, leading to more similar tax persecutions later on, and creating an image of corrupt and cruel officials. Citizens across the country cannot allow this kind of persecution that only exists in fake democracy to continue. Politicians who help people eradicate fraud, correct mistakes, redress senseless tax persecution, are the ones who leave their names in history. In addition, permanent civil servants should know that loyalty to the leader in the authoritarian period no longer exists. In the democratic era, how can Tai Ji Men's property, which was illegally confiscated by the government, using authoritarian means, not be returned as soon as possible?
I have taken on several cases which are almost similar. In these cases, the state insisted you owed taxes. You are taxed on income that you never received. I didn't make that money at all. I didn't earn it, but the state would quote certain laws that we do not comprehend and issued the tax penalty. How ridiculous! This kind of absurdity happens every day. I felt disheartened this year. It is not easy being a tax attorney. I want to be a family lawyer. As a family lawyer, when there is a high-profile case, we have the opportunity to be invited on political talk shows. We just have to make a few comments, and we are appreciated and receive a lot of applause. But tax cases are hard. We have to fight the National Taxation Bureau. We have to fight the administrative court. Going up against the administrative court, we all know, is a losing battle. 9 out of 10 cases will be dismissed by the court citing no probable cause. I often want to advise these tax victims to borrow money to pay off the taxes. But I can't say these words because of what we were taught in school. What do we pursue in the law? It's right and wrong. It's justice. When we are trained to uphold justice, how can we accept an injustice tax bill? How do we convince ourselves? How can we convince our clients to accept an unjust tax bill? I believe that the progression of the Tai Ji Men case is indicative of the status of Taiwan's legal tax reform. I was often asked, why does Tai Ji Men have to publicize their case? Why do they go around handing out flyers? Why can't they just pay their taxes? Every time they ask me these questions, I will say, I suggest you take their flyers and take a good look at what's going on before you pass judgment. I'm glad I kept calling for it. More and more people are saying, oh. Attorney Chen, I ran into the tax volunteers again at a certain intersection. I took their flyers and read them. I'm shocked. How could this happen in our country? I answered, yes, and it keeps happening. Do you think that Tai Ji Men is the only tax victim? No, it is not. In every corner of Taiwan, there are tax victims who are bullied by the state and are at a loss as to what to do. So the tax volunteers serve as a beacon of light in guiding their future direction. A month ago, one of our hospital directors came to share with me. He said that he also encounters a wrongful case, a grievance. Now, he has been sentenced and it's confirmed. Yet he is not convinced and is still applying for a reconsideration, a retrial. Just now I reported this to Professor Chen, Zulung, and I called him again. I told him I am here on Katagalan Boulevard, participating in an event called Wake Up Taiwanese, Recuse Human Rights Plus. And I have witnessed several tax victims to share their stories here. I believe that our hearts are united, and by doing so, we hope that our country will be better, and that our government officials will truly become the public servants of all the people in our country. I think that 25 years suffering, we are still on the way going forward. I believe we are not just doing this for ourselves, but we have seen people's sufferings, and we hope that they will be relieved of their suffering. Hope that we can all keep going, and I'm positive that we will succeed. We must be righteous, compassionate, humble, and truthful. I just noticed your bag with the word truth on it. We are on the hunt for the truth of universal value, human dignity, peace, reason, non-violence, and love are manifestations of this truth. John Jarvan discussed the right to resist. When the government's behavior has become intolerable to the people, if you do not stand up and speak up, you are the weak, and you may even be on the side of the perpetrator. Please keep 4 keywords in mind: fairness, justice, peace, and holiness. Positive energy is extremely beneficial. Negative emotions are unimportant, simply ignore them. The homework we should do is to learn how to exude positive energy. What we seek is value and faith, also known as confidence, hope, and love. What exactly is confidence? Confidence is when you believe in the intangible but see the visible result. I can attest that it will be rectified. What you believe and see is what you call confidence. The unnoticed outcome is visible. What exactly is love? Empathy. Think in a different place, from the perspective of the other person. What exactly is hope? When there is nothing, when it is dark, you can see the dawn and never give up hope. So here we are, we have worth and faith, we have confidence, hope, and love. Finally, I'd like to state that Taiwan requires justice in order to maintain the country's stability. This is the goal of our collaborative efforts. Thank you very much.
I think we are now in a democratic era. But on December 19, 1996, the Tai Ji Men injustice case actually happened. It is unbelievable. I am willing to stand up and support you. I admire you all for standing up here today in the cold wind and caring about the tax reform. I would like to call you all tax reform heroes from the bottom of my heart and salute you. Just now a group of young students were dancing, and they were asking for abolishing the bonus system. Abolishing the bonus system. I suddenly thought of an incident that is personally related to me. My younger brother, with a bachelor degree of accounting, Soochow University in Taiwan, suddenly applied for a transfer from the National Taxation Bureau of Taipei to a small township office in the countryside 8 years ago. At that time, I asked him the reason for his decision, but he did not want to tell me. Today I finally realized that, because my brother is a Buddhist and vegetarian with conscience, he did not want to receive illegal bonus, so he left his last high-paying job and preferred to work as an unimportant staff in the countryside. We hope that these unconscionable people in the National Taxation Bureau of the Central Area can learn from my brother that their conscience can be awakened and that they will return as soon as possible the justice on December 19th incident, which Tai Ji men deserve.
This video is an excellent introduction to the unfair and unjustified problems faced by Tai Ji men. And our first speaker now will be Dr. Massimo Introvigne, who is the founder of the Center for Studies on New Religious Movements and editor-in-chief of the Bitter Winter magazine. Mr. Introvigne, the floor is yours.
Thank you. The rule of law is a basic conquest in the Western journey towards democracy. While there is no rule of law, citizens are at the mercy of the capriciousness of the rulers. They can arrest, detain, or even execute them just because they had a bad day or the victims were in the wrong place at the wrong time. With the rule of law, everybody is subject to clearly established status, including the rulers themselves. Those in power and the state are as accountable as the common citizens. There are two different ways to violate the rule of law, and interestingly, in the case of Tai Ji men, both violations were committed. The first is to subvert the meaning of the words rule of law and to call the rule of law not the submission of the rulers to the law, but the submission of the law to the rulers. Although Hitler and the Nazis had their own version of this theory, it was first formulated by Karl Marx. He called the rule of law a great and dangerous illusion that unfortunately the working classes naively believed in, particularly in the UK. In fact, Marx and Engels, in the manifesto of the Communist Party, wrote that the so-called rule of law is only the will of the bourgeoisie made into a law for all, a will whose essential character and direction are determined by the economic conditions of existence of the bourgeoisie. In other words, the rich people, the bourgeoisie, according to Marx, first make a law protecting only their power, then instills in the proletarians the false idea that the rule of law protects all citizens. Happily, Marx said, he had a solution. The communist revolution would soon allow the proletarians to establish their own rule of law. But who are the proletarians? Their interpreter is the Communist Party. So in a communist regime, there are laws, but they should be applied or not applied based on whether they promote or damage the Communist Party. And this is true of all totalitarian regimes, not only the communist ones, and was also applied in Taiwan during the martial law period. Yes, there were laws. No, they were not enforced independently, but only when they favored the interests of the ruling party. Although in a somewhat attenuated form, this continued in Taiwan in the post-authoritarian period, as evidenced by the unbelievable number of violations of law committed by those who organized the persecution of Tai Ji men. There is also a second way of violating the rule of law principle, which is more common in democratic societies. It is the way the Roman lawyer and politician Cicero, who lived in the 1st century before Christ and is regarded by many as the greatest legal scholar of all times, expressed with the words summum ius, summa iuria. Actually, he didn't totally invent this, and he found a slightly modified version of the sentence as ius summum summa malitia in a comedy of the 2nd century BCE, Euton Timorumenos, the Self-Destructor by Terence, a playwright of African Berber origins who came to Rome as a slave and worked his way to freedom and fame through his literary skills. But it's thanks to Cicero that the concept summum ius summa iuria became crucial for the Western philosophy of law. A literal translation from Latin is the highest law is the highest injustice. But the meaning is that a literal application of the law without regard to its rational and ultimate purposes is actually the best tool to produce injustice. There is now a literary genre of sort which consists of the answer sent by Taiwanese ministries to those in the United States and elsewhere who ask why on earth the Tai Ji Men case is not solved. These answers always express the same concept, that in maintaining the tax bill for 1992 against Tai Ji Men and its leader, Dr. Hong Tao-tzu, after the highest courts in Taiwan had stated that they were never guilty of tax evasions and other tax bills had been corrected to zero, and in auctioning and seizing Tai Ji Men's sacred land based on the 1992 ill-founded tax bill, the National Taxation Bureau and the Administrative Enforcement Agency literally respected the law, so the letters say. Note that these letters do not state that anything different happened in 92 that did not happen in the other years, thus implicitly admitting that imposing taxes or alleging a tax evasion for 92 does not make sense. No, they keep repeating like an old broken vinyl record that the laws, particularly the laws on the statute of limitation, were literally applied to the case. If Cicero were alive today, he would say that he had found in Taiwan a perfect example of summum ius, summa iuria. The most fastidious and literal application of a law, totally ignoring the law's goal and the rights of the citizens, had generated the highest injustice indeed. In the Tai Ji Men case, by pretending to apply the law, the rule of law was substantially denied and subverted. Restoring justice in this case is the only way to also restore the rule of law. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Introvigne, for reminding us that the rule of law is a basic conquest in the Western journey towards democracy. But now people and peoples all over the world want to enjoy the benefits of the rule of law. But unfortunately, rulers have a lot of imagination to violate in a sort of apparently legal way the rule of law. And one of them is to subvert, as you said, the meaning of the word and call the rule of law, not the submission of the rulers to the law, but the submission of the law to the rulers. I will now introduce our second speaker, Mr. Hans Noot from the Netherlands. He is the president of Gerard Noot Foundation for Freedom of Religion or Belief. The floor is yours, Mr. Noot.
Thank you very much. Today, as we commemorate Taiwan's Day of the Rule of Law, we congratulate its citizens towards so much progress over the past few decades. You're not alone in the struggle for the rule of law and the consequential freedoms. And deplorable as it is, this fight is not without its necessary sacrifices. The battle never ends. The road is unpaved, rocky with twists and turns. The question is, what freedoms do we seek? Some assume that people are only free if they have the power to trade and make an honest living. Others feel the need for the right of association. Others again maintain that the freedom of conscience or the freedom from persecution is paramount. Freedom of expression is a right that many seek after. After all, how free are we if the state controls the media or if the media manipulates the people with false information? How about the freedom of movement or the freedom from the fear of foreign oppressing powers? Whatever our quest, it is a telltale of the limitations and fears we people experience. It is an expression of societal trauma. All of these freedoms mentioned are valid. After all, freedoms are good for both the individual as well as for the nation. One questions then, if there were an overarching structure that could liberate a nation and set all citizens free, what would that be? Indeed, there is such an overarching structure, but certainly not. It is not about lawlessness or corruption or the dictates of a small group at the top. Paradoxically, these protections are found in the opposite, namely the rule of law. Yes, you heard me right. It is laws that make people free. However, not just any laws. Not all laws are just. Not all laws are designed to protect the individual. Not all laws apply to everyone equally. And not all laws are enforced appropriately. There is one vital prerequisite to make this system of law and order work. It is that laws need to be applicable to each individual and organization equally. No one has power over the law. There are no elites that are above the law. No one can abuse the law without a penalty. No one can bribe him or herself out of the consequences of a criminal act or into the favor with the authorities. That is the definition of the rule of law we're talking about. No state authorities, no politicians, how powerful he or she may be, no police, no corporation, no government agency, not even the tax authority, no religious leader, not anybody or no organization can change or even bend a just law without the frowning eye of the judiciary. The rule of law is enshrined in the national constitution as a sacred document. It becomes effective if it is enforced by the police, cherished by politicians, and judged by an independent judiciary with enough teeth to enforce its verdicts. A judiciary shielded from corruptive, political, or financial gain, irrespective of the perpetrator's financial or social status, just as the law intended it. Such rule of law provides freedom for all. The application of the rule of law goes hand in hand with a strong anti-corruption policy. Taiwan is number 35 on the top 100 nations mentioned in the Global Corruption Index scale. But having studied numerous corruptive acts by the Taiwan National Tax Bureau that were overturned time and time again in a court of law, one wonders to what extent freedom and liberties are acceptable in Taiwan. Why is it that the National Tax Bureau got away with trumped-up fraud charges, coercion, threats, illegal raids and confiscation of property and auctioning it off, theft, imprisonment, and defaming the Tai Ji Men and its Dizi? After 25 years, this case is still a hot topic without resolution. It is even increasingly receiving global attention. The judiciary has no grip on these illegal activities. Those who have received corruptive bonuses for going after the Tai Ji Men have not been brought to justice. The Dizi have not seen justice and restitution after having won so many court cases. The government is not rectified the abuse of the power of the National Tax Bureau as yet. And the Tai Ji Men are not the only victims of this corruptive tax system, and still no legal tax reforms have been in the cards. If and when that happens, Taiwan rapidly ascends to a higher rank in the Global Corruption Index scale and towards the desired freedoms and protection of individual and organizational rights. Nations consists of humans, valuable humans. They need to be equally protected by independent and powerful courts. Any nation that assumes that the rights of these humans are subject to the needs of the nation may one day find that there is no more humans left to rule over. The rule of law for each individual and organization equally remains the core of any government's mandate. We wish Taiwan success on the road to freedom and liberty. Thank you. Mr. Fautré, time is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Noot, and for reminding us that it's the laws that can make people free, But there is one vital prerequisite, as you said, to make the system of law and order work. It is that laws need to be applicable to each individual and organization equally. The next speaker is Mr. Thierry Valle, who is the director of the NGO, the coordination of the associations, in French, la coordination des associations et particuliers pour la liberté. Mr. Valle, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Fautré. Thank you for inviting me to this day of rule of law. The government of Taiwan is to be commended for organizing this day and for the progress that justice has made in Taiwan. One of the fundamental principles of rule of law is that it should be the same for everyone. As soon as rule of law ceases, is to be the same for all, it's created second-class citizens, leaves rooms for arbitrariness, and is an open doors for a form of totalitarianism. An enlightened government should be vigilant to all forms of injustice and make sure that all the bodies that compose it are law-abiding and cannot be instrumentalized for private interest and harm to minorities. In Taiwan, the National Tax Office is currently undermining the effectiveness of the judicial system. A rule of law state like Taiwan should not tolerate for decades. A group is at the mercy of a state body that deprives them of their rights. In 2009, Taiwan ratified the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR. This covenant guarantees in its Article 14, all should be equal before the courts and tribunals. Everyone is entitled to a fair and public hearing by a competent, independent, and impartial tribunal established by law in the determination of any criminal charge against him or his civil rights or obligations. In their struggle for injustice, the Tai Ji men have sought the assistance of international experts and NGOs such as ours. As a UN-recognized NGOs, our contribution was to bring the case of the Tai Ji men and the injustice they suffer in Taiwan to the attention of the UN Human Rights Council, where we denounce the way in which the tax weapon was used and misused to harm the Tai Ji men. In this statement, we pointed out and denounced the unscrupulous means used by the National Tax Office in its attempt to destroy the Tai Ji men movement. The use of the tax weapon against spiritual minorities is unfortunately a common practice in many countries, including France, which finally, after a struggle to denounce this unjust practice, was condemned by the European Court of Human Rights. In September, at the 48th session of the Human Rights Council, we renewed our appeal for Tai Ji men. This time, we highlighted the confiscation of the Tai Ji men's place of worship by Taiwanese government. This is another form of discrimination, just as serious, because the spiritual community cannot exist without a place of worship. To conclude, I join Mr. Fautré that this day of full of law is an opportunity to us to advocate for the rule of law in Taiwan in a constructive way. The situation of the Tai Ji men cannot longer be ignored in the world, and the Taiwanese government must allow the Tai Ji men to enjoy their rights, their place of worship, and to be free to contribute to world peace without concern. Thank you. Your mic.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Thank you, Mr. Valle, for your contribution and for reminding us that the rule of law should be the same for everyone. Otherwise, the rulers create first-class and second-class citizens and all sorts of discrimination. It was told before by Mr. Hans Noot that Taiwan was ranked 35 out of 100 people in the index of corruption in the world. It's good news in a sense, but it's not in the reality, and according to what we can see in the field, as in the case of Tai Ji men, there is a double system of treatment of the taxpayers, and this should be denounced. And Taiwan should not deserve such a place, will not deserve such a place, to keep such a place if it does not bring a humane and fair solution to the problem of Tai Ji men. The next speaker will be Mr. Alessandro Amicarelli, President of the European Federation for Freedom of Belief. The floor is yours, Mr. Alessandro Amicarelli.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Good afternoon for those of you who are in Europe. We had a very interesting review of the Tai Ji Men case today and some very interesting remarks. The case is still ongoing. There is still a lot to do for helping the Taiwanese people reach a full legal system, a full democratic legal system, because the Tai Ji Men case is indeed a threat to the legal system of Taiwan. What is very important is having in all these seminars that we have around the world and online webinars is to have testimonies, witnesses, and especially direct contact with the community which is affected by this very strange judicial case and legal case, generally speaking. And it's very important to have young witnesses, because that's the next generation that is going to deal with the life of Taiwan. I'm not giving a full speech today. My main role is to introduce the second session of today's webinar. And we are going to start with a video, which is a press conference which was held in December on the 29th. So we now have a video, and then we will start with the testimonies. We should have the video in a few seconds. I recon.
The Tai Ji Men Case is internationally exemplary and important, and yes, we plan to continue our campaign about it. Our voice will not be silenced until the voice of justice will speak and solve the case.
今天我们一同邀请国际的专家学者，还有台湾的专家学者，一同来为太极门发声，所以我们才会举办这个记者会。一个上万人的团体都要因为一张错误的税单被荼毒25年，那如果我们台湾一般小老百姓遭受到这样的苦，那要怎么办？
今天我们现场除了国内专家学者的声援之外，也有许多来自国外重量级的专家，他们是国际间拥有非常高知名度的，包含宗教学者或者是社会学学者等。那他们也特别为今天的记者会捎来了重要的讯息。
The first press conference on the Tai Ji Men case in Taiwan is really an historical event.
Tai Ji Men case is essentially not a matter of mere fiscal justice, but of religious freedom and human rights.
Very clearly, there is corruption in the case of Tai Ji Men, because in that case, there are abuses by the administrative power for private gain.
And the world is watching. People are watching how this case is going to be handled. And I encourage all of the decision makers, to put a stop to this.
And in this way, actually, Tai Ji Men to receive what was theirs for always, just because they invested a lot in making all the efforts in order to grow their spiritual community, and they deserve to be free and their human rights to be respected.
25 senior international scholars and human rights activists just wrote this month to President Tsai asking for a political solution of the Tai Ji Men case. And on behalf of them, I solemnly reiterate this request today. President Tsai, please adopt a political solution and solve the Tai Ji Men case.
希望今天这么多国际的专家学者，还有台湾的专家学者的发声，我们的政府可以面对问题，解决问题。
所以，抢救台湾的民主、法治、自由与人权，是我们所有世界公民共同的责任。现在这个关键时刻，第一步就是要平反跨世纪的太极门假案，并追究加害者，以回复受难者的名声，还有彰显正义，让台湾的转型正义真正的被落实，真正摆脱过去威权专制的遗毒，迎向一个真民主、真法治、真自由与真人权的新时代。
正义之士，良心大团结，互惠共利，人权向太平，正义之士，良心大团结，互惠共利，人权向太平。
In Taiwan, we at Bitter Winter saw at work Taliban of the National Tax Bureau or Taliban of the Administrative Enforcement Agency. 55-year-long persecution of a peaceful spiritual movement in a democratic country such as Taiwan. The Tai Ji Men case is internationally exemplary and important, and yes, we plan to continue our campaign about it. Our voice will not be silenced until the voice of justice will speak and solve the case.
Here we are back. So if there is no justice, there can be no liberty. If there is no liberty, there can be no justice for Tai Ji Men and for Taiwan people, Taiwanese people, and Taiwan as a democratic country. We can now move on with a series of testimonies from witnesses from Tai Ji Men. The first witness is Mr. Hang Tian-si, engineer and Dizi of Tai Ji Men.
Hello, hosts and online friends. I'm Tai Ji Men Dizi, Hong Tian-shi. I have been following my Shifu and practicing martial arts and self-cultivation for nearly 30 years. The respect for Shifu is the first and foremost. We have to have both skills and virtues. The precepts in Tai Ji Men are very strict. You shall not show off your skills to others, nor shall you bully others with your skills. Cultivating one's heart, assisting the weak, upholding justice, and loving one's country. The Tai Ji Men injustice case occurred in 1996. The prosecutor found no factual evidence of the crime. Knowing the crime of fraud cannot be substantiated, he colluded with the National Taxation Bureau to issue heavy penalties against Tai Ji Men. The spiritual cultivation of thousands of Tai Ji Men Dizi has been abrupted by such abominable conduct. This is an outright violation of human rights. Human right is a universal value and gift. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that human beings shall enjoy freedom from fear and want. According to the ICCPR, Everyone should have the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. Article 13 and Article 15 of our Constitution also stipulate that freedom of religion and belief and people's property rights shall be protected. According to Article 53 and 113 of the Enforcement Law, the land used for churches, worship, and practice shall not be subject to seizure or auction. However, after the court of third instance found Tai Ji Men not guilty of any crime or tax evasion, and the defendants had received the national compensation for wrongful detention, the NTB and Administrative Enforcement Agency illegally auctioned off Tai Ji Men's sacred land for the bonus money. This has seriously violated people's freedom of belief. 25 years ago, Tai Ji Men was framed by rogue officials who have deceived, intimidated, bullied, and illegally prosecuted Tai Ji Men. Is Taiwan still carrying out the brutal tactics from martial law era under the guise of democracy? This is like another white terror of February 28th, which has left a permanent scar on the hearts of Taiwanese people. There is no corpus delicti, no procedural justice, and utterly no respect on court verdicts. Many elites perished unjustly, and many left despite their affection for Taiwan. The Tai Ji Men 1219 incident forced our brothers and sisters to leave Taiwan. We are near the end of our forbearances. Martial arts practitioners are brave and fearless. Many people advise us to charge ahead. However, Tai Ji Men, Shifu, and Dizi love our country. For 25 years, we chose to step up with a peaceful voice to expose the conduct of these corrupt officials, so that our president would not be deceived. As President Tsai said, we need human rights in our country. We need to move forward toward freedom and democracy. Tai Ji Men Dizi will defend justice, defend our human rights, and we will persist till the end.
Thank you. And we all know that we need to be persistent and consistent with what we all are doing. We now have a second witness, Miss Crystal Wang, who is president of a trading company in the United States, and Dizi of Tai Ji Men as well.
Hi, everyone. I am honored to be here today. 8 years ago, at the time I suffered from depression, but unable to save myself, I got a chance to visit Tai Ji Men. The moment I met Tai Ji Men, I was deeply moved by the purity of the white uniform and the warm smile from everyone. I immediately decided to join Tai Ji Men. After more than 8 years of perseverance, I still refuse to give up, because I know that this pure place is my strong backbone of my spirit. Tai Ji Men is a place for self-cultivation. When I first started, I know that all the brothers and sisters come from different walks in life with different religious beliefs. But they don't talk about politics, religions, or business. This is just a place to cultivate our body and mind, which lets me feel a simple joy in my heart. Over the years, I have learned how to be myself in Tai Ji Men. I first learned that I must love myself. After I had the ability of loving myself, I can love others, people around me, and in the world. This understanding has benefited me a lot. I had always thought that loving myself is a shameful, selfish act before. I had always kept my eyes on the people around me, hoping they can conform to my standards. I worked hard to provide my two daughters academic classes and extracurricular activities, but they were exhausted, and in return, I was exhausted too. I was bitter that they don't work hard enough, and they complained that they have no free time. Until I realized that I don't owe my children. I owed my children a loving upbringing. My task is to facilitate them grow into themselves. Once I realized that children are independent individuals, and my role is to accompany their growth, I got rid of my anxiety. Let them make their own choices and facilitate them with making choices. Shifu taught us to accept ourselves, tell ourselves that we are the best, and that we are the only ones that no one can replace. I just started to look inside my heart, what I need exactly. I no longer just focus on others. Instead, I focus on myself. On a few occasions, when I listened to Shifu's teachings, I burst into tears. But I didn't know what it was for. I just couldn't stop crying, probably because I was comforted inside my heart. I finally become brave, no longer afraid of anything. I no longer dodge what I should face. Over the years, following Shifu, I have also done some good deeds to promote love and peace. Shifu took his Dizi to meet with the world leaders, promoting unity and conscience. Shifu leads us to take the peace bill, invites influential people to ring the peace bill, and holds a bell ringing ceremony, so that when the bell rings, the leaders will bring peace to the world, stop evil and promote good. This world could be more beautiful. I have followed Shifu and have been to New York several times. I have participated in the UN conferences related to the International Day of Conscience on April 5th every year. I can't believe that I can also contribute to the peace of this world. However, I don't quite understand the unjust and false tax case that Tai Ji Men has suffered. Despite being such a good Qigong martial arts group, Tai Ji Men was subjected to political purge and religious persecution by the government under the authoritarian political environment at that time 25 years ago. Prosecutor Hou Kuan-ren not only searched Tai Ji Men without search warrants, but detained Shifu, Shimu, other brothers and sisters. He even used media to manipulate public opinions, to smear Shifu, Shimu, brothers and sisters' images before they were tried. Thousands of brothers and sisters were terrified, and they were bullied and humiliated by public opinions in the streets and lanes. The IRS issued unjust tax bills, even after we were ruled not guilty and no tax evasion in the final criminal trial. The IRS still refuses admitting their wrongdoings and cancel all the ill-founded tax bills. It corrected only 1991, 1993 to 1996, but maintained 1992 unjust and false tax bill. Many experts and scholars have pointed out that the main reason is the tax bonuses of the government personnel, which is ironic. Taiwan's status of democracy is really making us worried. And it will be a joke in the international arena. Hence, Noodt, the chairman of the Dutch Foundation for Freedom of Religion or Belief, criticized that fact that unscrupulous officials in the Tai Ji Men is not punished. He is concerned that this sends a message to the public. The NTB can be impunity and override the law, not for the law, so serve the people. Another message is that freedom of religion and freedom of speech are not fully guaranteed in Taiwan. Taiwan's NTB has overpowered the rest of the administrative agencies so that the victims cannot be appeared and rectified. This is a crisis of democracy. On September 11th last year, as a Dizi of Tai Ji Men, I went to the headquarters of United Nations in New York, the Capitol Hill, and the Federal Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. to express our reverence of the persecution over the past 25 years. I hope we can get the attention of people from all over the world through the international forces. Let the Taiwanese government immediately restore their innocence. In December of last year, I went to Washington, D.C. again with my brothers and sisters and went to the Taipei Economic and Cultural Representative Office to express our feelings. We stood in front of the TECRO office in the cold wind for 3 hours, expressing our demands peacefully, singing the hopeful song, Love, and hope that the representative shout of the TECRO office could hear our voice. Unfortunately, in the end, no one came out to accept our petition. I also had the opportunity to participate in the online and in-person press conference held by Human Rights Without Frontiers and Action Alliances to redress 1219, where we lighted up truth together. The persecution of Tai Ji Men has attracted the attention of scholars all over the world and the international community. Today is Taiwan's Judicial Day. I hope that the Taiwanese government can correct its mistakes as soon as possible, cancel all illegal tax bills in Tai Ji Men, and return Tai Ji Men its innocence, so it can let the world know that Taiwanese government is a true democracy. It can face mistakes, correct mistakes. It can be convinced by the international community that it becomes a legitimate democratic government that respects the human rights. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Crystal, for your very moving testimony. And we all hope that things may change and go back and restore democracy and restore justice for Tai Ji Men. We now have another testimony, Ms. Rachel Jiang, attorney in Taiwan and Dizi of Tai Ji Men.
Hello everyone, I'm going to report the Tai Ji Men case today. From the opening video, we can see that the case was wrongfully charged during the religious crackdowns in 1996, when a political purge was launched after the first presidential election in the name of the religious crackdown. Tai Ji Men was wrongfully caught with no reasons. We have branch academies all over Taiwan. The Kaohsiung branch was the first one to be searched, but the search was closed with no findings of any crime on November 30th, 1996. The Hsinchu Investigation Bureau received second anonymous charge and summoned Shifu for questioning. Again, the second questioning was closed with no findings of crime on December 18th. Then on the 19th, Ho Kwan-ren launched a search into 19 Tai Ji Men branch academies with press and hundreds of armed policemen. Shifu was taken on the day and wrongfully detained. On the 23rd, Shimu, who was not on site during the search on the 19th, went to the investigation bureau trying to clarify issues, but Shimu was also detained. Then on the 24th, we saw Tiaoxing Chen, Li Juanpeng, Wan Ding Zhang, and many others whose residences were illegally searched. It is an ironically unpeaceful Christmas Eve. More than 400 press reports were posted in the media during the investigation. When the case was publicly indicted, raising goblins was used as a reason. The judge in the first court did not dare to post bail immediately after the charges were filed. Later, after the trial, Shifu was bailed on May 27, 1997, but he was restricted from leaving the country at the same time. It was not until the third judge, Mr. Yang, and by then he had already read the evidence, and he lifted the restriction on Shifu's travel ban on June 16, 1988. Former tax officer Yue Shenshi had come forward to reveal the case and confirm the case was fabricated by Kuan Renhou, who not only framed the criminal case and created fake witnesses, but also asked people from the National Taxation Bureau to cooperate with him to make a fake tax case. That's why the tax case, which has been derived from the criminal case, has been ongoing until now. As soon as the criminal case started, all the properties of Zhang Menren were frozen the next day. The properties were subject to multiple restrictive orders and couldn't be disposed of. The orders have been on for 24 years. Even though we have won 18 petitions and appeals, the tax authority did not lift the restriction. Our properties were ruined after long years due to a lack of maintenance from the restrictive order. The tax authority also imposed a travel ban on Shifu. With all his properties frozen by the tax office, Shifu was subject to the travel ban. Eventually, Shifu had to provide the branch academies as collaterals, and the ban was lifted on July 27, 1999, with a total duration of 463 days. However, on January 8, 2002, the NTB again imposed a travel ban on Shifu and Shimu. Shimu provided collateral to have the ban lifted on February 7th. As the case was going through administrative appealing and could be transferred to execution, so Shifu was again subject to a travel ban in 2003. The ban was lifted on December 26, 2003. Shifu has been around the world promoting peace activities since 2006, but the NTB imposed a travel ban on him again on March 2, 2010. As Shifu was out of the country, the ban was to restrict his rights of return to his own country. When the travel ban was issued while you were abroad, it means if you go back to your country, you cannot leave. With a heart for promoting peace around the world, Shifu would not want to give up his mission for the sake of getting together with his family and Dizi in Taiwan. The travel ban is a violation of the rights guaranteed by the two international covenants. The willful detention, media smear, abusive tax, and travel ban are like the white terrors we had during the martial law period. Shifu's being restricted from leaving the country is already a piece of evidence that we're still at martial law period. Although Taiwan's martial law has been lifted, if the Tai Ji Men case has not been resolved, then the actual situation is still under martial law. Therefore, the martial law in Taiwan has lasted for 72 years and 7 months, which is the #1 country in the world, more than 24 years longer than the 48 years of martial law declared in Syria. Only when the Tai Ji Men case is really solved can Taiwan get rid of its notorious reputation for being in martial law. On the occasion of the International Human Rights Day at the end of last year, the President stressed that a democratic and free Taiwan will not only remember the lesson of its authoritarian history, but will also continue to make efforts to ensure democracy, freedom, and human rights at the present time. We want to tell the President that it's time to step out and to take immediate action to rectify Tai Ji Men case with international standards of human rights. Law cannot enforce itself. We have to show our conscience. Only conscience has solutions to the problems in our country, in our society, and in our life. With happiness comes a joyful family. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We can now move on with the next speaker, and I'm very happy to introduce the next presentation because we have the youngest Dizi so far, Shaffer Chen, who is an elementary school student and niece of Tai Ji Men. She's with us today, but we have a pre-recorded video which we are going to watch now together.
Hello everyone, my name is Shaffer. I am 10 years old and I am a Tai Ji Men Dizi. I joined Tai Ji Men in 2014. I joined Tai Ji Men at the beginning because I wanted to help the world. In my childhood, I felt that helping people was to comfort them when they are sad and give them sweets to help them get better. But now I help people by enlightening them anytime and anywhere when they need me, and I give him some suggestion to solve it, and I learn how to tolerate others in Tai Ji Men. When I was in class, I often helped my classmates with their homework and waited patiently for them to solve problems when they were slow. I often play a caring little angel at school, caring for my classmates and uphold justice when friends need help. My older sister often tells me that I am really enthusiastic because she said that she feels like I was the person who will help the other to cross the road. But sometimes I am too rattled. This caused my classmates to hate me, so I gradually learned that it is important to learn to speak. My shifu said that I should say what others like to hear and what others want to hear. At first, I didn't understand, but I always felt that I had to speak more straightforwardly. I didn't understand until I followed my parents and grandma to convey love and peace to relatives and friends and the areas of conscience. Some people didn't understand the reason why we follow Shifu to promote the good thoughts to people. So I also followed along with my dogs. Only when I saw someone happily accepting my blessing, that is when I start to realize that there might be someone in this world waiting for my blessing. I'm very grateful to Shifu for teaching me many life principles that I would not learn in school. I came to Lesotho when I was 6 years old because my parents were the victims of the tax case. My parents decided to terminate the company in Taiwan. I immigrated to Lesotho. They had to leave grandmother who was living with us in Taiwan alone. So we are often worried about our grandmother's living conditions. I feel very angry about the Tai Ji Men case, just like the government that was supposed to protect and take care of us and find any reason to rob us of our hard-earned money. Even the most basic rights of life are deprived of the property. In a poor country like Lesotho, everyone knows to protect the most basic right and dignity of the people. I think Taiwan's government doesn't know how to change and doesn't know how to care for the people and also let the people feel better. If the government were really like this, then the people of Taiwan are really peaceful. Although I live abroad, I still hope that one day I can return to Taiwan and do my best for my country, because I really love my country, my family, and my friend. I hope that I can always do good deeds to help more people and spread more kind thoughts to the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaffer. And I'm sure from the faces of everyone, I know that we all enjoyed this lovely presentation, and we should make a clap to Shaffer, all of us. Yeah, and we totally agree with you that more people should get involved, and we hope that you can lead the change in the youth community of Taiwan, even though you are in another country now. We now have another presentation, Mr. Fred Lee, Fire Officer and Dizi of Tai Ji Men. Fred, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Amicarelli. Good evening, everyone. And I'm very delighted to participate in today's webinar. This is Fred, and I work as a fire officer in the export protecting zone in Kaohsiung, because besides, I'm studying for a master's degree in law at National Kaohsiung University. And 8 years ago, my family and I joined Tai Ji Men to practice Qigong and cultivate ourselves. I have learned and grown a lot since then. My Shifu, Dr. Hong, Zangmenren of Tai Ji Men, teaches us how to apply wisdom in our daily lives. And my relationship with my father, which had been drifting apart, has gradually restored, and now I'm part of a happy family. And by the way, my daughter was born a month ago, so I guess now that's the more the merrier. And Shifu also teaches me to rescue a person, we have to rescue his heart. Therefore, running the ambulance duties, I would do my best to encourage the patients and wounded to think positive and look at the bright side of life. Sharing the love of my Shifu and brothers and sisters from Tai Ji Men makes me realize the spirit and meaning of my work. For decades, Shifu has led us Dizi to promote the culture of love, peace, and conscience worldwide at our own expense. So far, we have visited 101 nations and held more than 3,000 cultural exchanges. The most touching part is hosting the ceremony of ringing the bell of peace and invites world leaders, influential individuals, and peace-loving people to make commitments and ring the bell for a harmonious and prosperous world. Since Salapan Ramanathan, former president of Singapore, first rang the bell, 399 prominent leaders from 122 nations have rung the bell, including 43 heads of state and government, 7 Nobel Prize laureates, UN ambassadors, and world leaders from various circles. The peaceful wishes are deeply imprinted in the hearts of those who rung the bell, which help them make decisions without forgetting their wishes and doing the right thing. I traveled abroad as an international volunteer with my Shifu a couple of times. I comprehended that what Shifu led us to do has profound meanings, which inspired me and changed me greatly. However, such a nice Qigong martial art organization was miraculously accused with forged evidence by the prosecutor and the NTV officers 25 years ago. In 2007, the criminal court ruled in the third trial that Tai Ji Men was not guilty and did not owe taxes. So the NTB should revoke the illegal tax bill according to the law. However, due to the incompetence of a few administrative court judges, and the obsession of tax officials and executive officers. The entire legal system in Taiwan was kidnapped. This unjust case is still not fully resolved, even though Tai Ji Men has exhausted every legal remedy and presented countless petitions to the presidential office and the 5 yuans. Obviously, this is a disaster and a tragedy for the victim. In my opinion, we lost the righteousness of this nation while the dignities and human rights were trampled to the ground. Today, the Judicial Day of Taiwan, as a student in the Master of Law Progress, I would like to mention that the well-known legal syllogism, the most commonly used legal deduction written in Methodology of Law by well-known jurist Carl Lawrence. Syllogism is an inference progress. We assign the facts of a specific case to the elements of laws and regulations to obtain specific legal effects. In other words, when we have a major premise and a major premise and a minor premise, then we can arrive to a conclusion, which is so-called syllogism. However, tax collection in Taiwan is not carrying out in accordance with the due process of law, of the rule of law. Tax officials often put the conclusion at first place, and the enforcement may have started before the verdict, while the judges would obviously show favor to the tax officials. That's why the administrative court are condemned as courts litigators hardly win. As a result, taxpayers are often unable to obtain effective relief. This really reverses the concept of the rule of law that I have ever had since I was a child. It is quite dangerous because it means that the entire tax environment in Taiwan is terrible. A country's most basic concept of the rule of law and legal procedures are ignored. The scale of fairness and justice is screwed. And the situations of running contrary to the rule of law is worrying. The tax problems have persisted in Taiwan for a long time. Countless victims of the tax tragedy have been diagnosed with depression, cancer, and some have even committed suicide. From individuals, lawyers to entrepreneurs, there are lots of cases of victimization. Most of them have no way to ask for help and have no choice but to compromise. The disasters caused by either institutional defects or egregious human error lead to fabricated tax cases happening in Taiwan. Therefore, Taiwan's entire tax environment is very much in need of humanitarian relief to help free Taiwanese citizens from tax anxiety, and thereby Taiwan can be a place where people can live and work happily with taxpayers' rights. Recently, there is a TV series in Taiwan, Tears of Fire, and it's quite popular. In the series, you can see firefighters taking risks and saving lives. The scenes are quite realistic. When I'm on ambulance duties, I regard patients as my family, which makes me want to reach and rescue the injured patient as soon as possible. I remembered once I jumped down the 6-meter-high drainage ditch in emergency without any equipment, just in order to approach the injured ASAP. Under the guidance of Shifu, I'm willing to listen to the difficulties encountered by the patients and help them change their mind positively, so as not to worry too much. After carrying out emergency aids time after time, I have a different experience of dignity, of human nature, and the value of life. When someone is in serious illness or drowning, I would consider it a disaster. I will share my love and reach out to heal that person. I love my country. Witnessing so many disasters in Taiwan due to unfair systems, as a firefighter, a rescuer, I think we should all share our love, reach out, and heal all those disasters in a spirit of rescue. In my opinion, we should insist on realizing the complete reform of the legal and tax system through the redress of the Tai Ji Men unjust case, which is a kind of disaster rescue, not only to rescue ourselves, but also to rescue more people who may be victims in the future. As the day of Taiwan's Judicial Day, I would like to pay tribute to the righteous who are willing to speak up and fight for justice. I also call on the government to value and implement humanitarianism, build administrative and judicial celebrity with integrity, and make taxpayers in Taiwan safe and happy, with dignity and human rights. Thank you for your attention. And thank you, Amicarelli, Mr. Amicarelli. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fred. That's a very interesting hope of what you just said of rescuing Taiwan. And it's interesting that you are a rescue officer. So that's a very interesting thing. So as we move to the end of the testimonies, before some conclusions and 2 more videos, we have one more testimony. So the next witness is Miss Shen, a project manager, and these are Tai Ji Men. Annie, the floor is yours.
Thanks for introduction, and good day, everyone. This is Annie. I'm currently working in a foreign company as a project manager. I'm also a Tai Ji Men Dizi who joined with my parents since I was 4. For past 27 years, Tai Ji Men has been a crucial part of my life, just like my family, my second home. My Shifu, Dr. Hong, teaches me the principle of doing things, differentiates right from wrong, true from false, and also educate in my daily life, so that I have enough judgment to do things correctly. My Shifu also educated me the most important thing of being respectful and thankful to my parents. In every stage of my life, my Shifu teaches me the wisdom to resolve the crisis and overcome challenges smoothly. I also seize the opportunity to participate in Tai Ji Men cultural performance and global cultural exchange activities. In May 2018, I was lucky to participate with my Shifu, Zhang Menren of Tai Ji Men, Vice President of Association of World Citizens, for WTA Taxpayer Regional Forum in Denmark, Copenhagen. There were a lot of experts from over 20 countries focused on taxpayers' human rights discussion and investigate on how to improve global tax reform with taxpayers' human rights enhancement. We came to North Europe with love and peace and hope to promote the philosophy of love and peace to the scholars from all over the world. What touched me the most was that every scholar feels so proud of the regulation of taxation in their countries. I could feel everyone's mission in enthusiasm for taxation and human rights. Under the leadership of my Shifu, I actively communicate with scholars from all over the world and spread this love and peace to everyone attending the meeting. I hope they can bring it back to their countries and let the seed thriving forever. During this event, I finally realized the reason Denmark is ranked as the happiest country among 178 in the world. Denmark is nearly a perfect country without any poverty, and the government is willing to invest 50 to 78% of tax on welfare and education. Danes are gratefully paying the tax because of their faith to spread the government of transparent, public, and fair. This inspired and encouraged me to be brave and stand up for my right to Taiwan's government regarding the wrongdoing of Tai Ji Men tax case. And Taiwan's government should correct and execute immediately of its management with conscience, which brings people happiness and safe life. The purpose of levying taxes is to allow the government to do more for saving people, rather than taking it as bonuses for personal benefit and using as a tool of oppressing the people and persecuting religious beliefs. In fact, the Tai Ji Men taxation case occurred in 1996, was selected by the Supervisory Council as a major index case for the protection of human rights from Summary Report on Human Rights Protection of the Third Supervisory Yuan in 2005. Even though the Supreme Court ruled that Tai Ji Men was clear and tax-free in 2007, the IRS failed to return the land and had been seized for many years and auction of the predetermined land for cultivation in August 2020. It has been 25 years, and it is the case with the longest duration and the most victims suffered since 228 incident. Dr. Hong, chairman of Tai Ji Men, has spoke on the International Day of Tolerance in November 2021. Everyone enjoying natural human rights and fundamental freedoms. And conscience is the source of love. Conscience motivates good governance, and conscience politics is created. Any decisions and actions of the government of various countries requires a people-oriented conscience. A balanced thinking of equality and respect for human rights is required. This is a concept that is necessary for the life of the earth and every citizen of the world to save their lives and continue to be sustainable. However, the tax disaster of Taiwan, incorrect behaviors from governments are severely damage our faith to the government. The purpose of the government is to serve people and help them to live a happier life. Penalties and taxations are the two major disasters that people are suffering from. Due to the prosecutor Ho Kuan-ren's abuse of power and the IRS illegal taxation, it has been extremely inhuman to Tai Ji Men Shifu and Dizi for more than 25 years. Tai Ji Men is just like my second home, which continuously brings me positive energy and encouragement during the past 27 years. How can I endure my home be bullied and suffered by illegal governments? So here, I'd like to call upon our President Tsai to learn from Denmark government of integrity, listen to people carefully, and take action to resolve the problems. We do hope in one day we could realize the power of belief for government as we work together for Taiwan. I do also hope in the coming future, I will feel the power of faith and strive for Taiwan. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Annie. Thank you for your testimony, your presentation, and your hopeful wish for Taiwan. And as we conclude this session, we now have some conclusions and remarks with Marco Respinti, journalist, director in charge of Bitter Winter Magazine. Marco, the floor is yours for your remarks and conclusions.
Thank you, Alessandro. It is such a privilege for me to be the closer of this important webinar. And it is now my pleasure to draw some general conclusion, as you just suggested. Of course, I have no intention to summarize the brilliant speeches of the speakers and the touching testimonies, at times conveniently vibrant, of the Dizi, both in persons and through recorded messages, who took the floor before me today. It would in fact mean to curtail their profound remarks to the effect of inevitably downsizing their contribution. I choose then to offer a few further reflection on some key points that already surfaced, and more than that, our meeting today. Of course, on Judicial Day in Taiwan, today all revolves around the idea of the rule of law. The rule of law is quintessential to justice. Willy Fautré underlined this today in his important opening remarks, adding that the rule of law is quintessential specifically to fiscal justice. When the rule of law is partially or totally denied, we have only the opposite of justice. If bringing justice to men through the rule of law is a supreme way to honor their untouchable dignity as human beings, partial or no rule of law essentially offends the dignity of the human person. Our speakers and testimonials stressed this point from different angles many times today, but it is never enough. There is in fact one danger in being so convinced, as I am, as we are, as you are, of the value of the rule of law, and that danger is begging the question. In other words, we often tend to take the rule of law for granted without focusing on its core meaning, a meaning that is as simple as truth. Noot phrased it brilliantly, quote, "Just laws make a people free," end of quote. It is as simple as that. If we cherish liberty, we must do justice. It is not an abstract concept. It is a personal, even intimate principle. If I cherish my own liberty, I must be just toward my neighbor. Now, as Thierry Valle said, quote, "As soon as justice ceases to be the same for all, it creates second-class citizens, leaves room for arbitrariness, and is open door to a form of totalitarianism," end of quote. This is why, again, in Thierry's words, quote, "An enlightened government should be vigilant to all forms of injustice and make sure that all the bodies that compose it are law-abiding and cannot be instrumentalized for private interest and harm to minorities," end of quote. Let me now, for a second, elaborate on a point I hold dear. The rule of law is indeed a splendid concept, as well as a splendid formula, even in its linguistic elements. The word law indicates both a single piece of legislation and the very concept of what is right as opposed to what is wrong. This directly suggests the idea that every single piece of legislation reverts to some form of arbitrariness if it is not firmly anchored to what is right and what is wrong, or good and evil. The word rule means govern and regulate. It describes the art of governing people in a society as the attempt to envision and then implement the best tools for fine-tuning the relationship among human beings so that they can enjoy freedom and cultivate virtue toward the personal and the common good. But Massimo Introvigne just alerted us today against the two ways of subverting the rule of law. First, quote, "To call rule of law not the submission of the rulers to the law, but the submission of the law to the rulers," end of quote. And secondly, again, quote, "A most fastidious and literal application of the law, totally ignoring the law's goal and the right of citizens, which generates the highest injustice." This is what we have seen happening to Tai Ji Men in Taiwan for a quarter of a century, and still going, as Alessandro Amicarelli stressed, with justice spectacularly denied to its Shifu and Dizi by some branches of Taipei's democratic government or by some of its officials who scorn justice. What happened is that these branches and/or officials of a democratic government transformed the rule of law into the law of the ruler, not submitting themselves as rulers to the law, but submitting the law to the will of despotic rulers. We all know that Taiwan is a beacon of democracy in a region of the world where arbitrariness, despotism, tyranny, absolutism, authoritarianism, and totalitarianism abound. Since Taiwan's government justly claims to govern people for the good, then the Taiwanese government must be the first to honor and respect and grant the rule of law to all its citizens. If it fails to do it, its credibility cracks. This is what our webinars essentially ask today, as well as our public actions in favor of Tai Ji Men ask, while Tai Ji Men, Shifu, and Dizi continue to suffer great injustice through a denial of the rule of law that vilifies their human rights, as these Hung Tien said, and their dignity. All in spite of the fact that the Tai Ji Men is a totally pacific movement, guilty of nothing, as these Crystal Wang remembered today, persecuted only for political reasons, using blatant lies, as this Rachel Young stressed, trespassing on basic people rights, as these and she said in the last remarks for today. Respect for the rule of law. This is the common voice raised by our panelists and testimonials, both in person through recorded message, in a day like today in which Taiwan celebrates the very essence of its democracy. And this common voice is directly addressed to the government of Taiwan, which needs to act now for the sake of its own credibility, as this Fred Lee said. And it is now my pleasure to thank all of today's panelists and testimonials for their great contribution, as well as to thank our audience who followed us so faithfully, and to salute CESNUR, the Center for the Studies on New Religions, and HRWF, Human Rights Without Frontiers, for hosting this series of important webinars on the Tai Ji Men case. There will be more public events like today's until the rule of law will prevail in Taiwan for all Taiwanese citizens. May all of us return to the innocence and purity of young Shaffer Chen. Now the real final word is by another video contribution. Thank you.
December 19th, 2021 marked the 25th anniversary of the onset of the Tai Ji Men case in Taiwan. Over 10,000 people from 14 countries participated in a protest that was organized by the Tax and Legal Reform League, Taiwan Association for Financial Criminal Law Study, and about a dozen other organizations in front of the Presidential Office Building in Taipei. For 25 years, Tai Ji Men has been calling upon the Taiwan government to resolve its case, return their sacred land, and clear the names of Tai Ji Men Shifu and Dizi.
The Tai Ji Men case is a landmark case where human rights and religious freedoms of Tai Ji Men Shifu and Dizi have been seriously violated, and it is the violation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and it's also the violation of 2 international covenants.
The date plays an important role in Tai Ji Men's history because 25 years ago, on December 19, 1996, Taiwan's former prosecutor ordered a raid on all academies of Tai Ji Men and some private residences. Tai Ji Men was accused of fraud and tax evasion by the prosecutor, but after a lengthy legal battle, Taiwan's Supreme Court ruled that the organization was not guilty of tax evasion or any other charges in 2007. The Action Alliance to Redress 1219 is an organization that is named after this date.
This case happened back to 1996, and at that time there's a religious crackdown that the land government tried to persecute the minority group or the spiritual group that they think not support the land government.
Over the summer in 2021, 2 reports on the Tai Ji Men case were presented to the United Nations Human Rights Council by Thierry Valle, director of CAPLC. Tai Ji Men and other speakers at the rally recounted their experiences of receiving tax bills that they claim were wrongfully issued by Taiwan's government. Damon Tsai explains that a system of bonuses received by taxation bureaucrats perpetuates the issuance of these tax bills.
税务奖励金，我们看到了非常多税灾户，他这个税单明明不是他的，或是已经很明显是开错了税单，但是为什么我们的国税局还要坚持开错误的税单？为什么行政执行署要坚持拍卖掉他们的财产呢？就是因为他们已经先拿了奖金了。
Organizers spoke about the challenges of appealing Taiwan's tax system.
台湾在没收财产，还有禁止人民出国、冻结他的账户、查封他的房子，都没有司法的审查，那就表示说，台湾从过去到现在新的这个租税法都是在破坏人权，那这是非常恐怖的。就是说，两公约2009年之后的两公约，它不但不实践。 他还继续的加强这个力道，要去没收人民的财产，甚至没收之后呢，他也不给理由。最主要是他不给你法律和行政的救济。
The event and the case have inspired a new generation of activists, some of whom were not yet born or were children when the Tai Ji Men case began.
So I'm also the Tai Ji Men Dizi, and this case happened when I was 7 years old, and now I'm 32, so it's like very, very long, 25 years. And I think the reason why so many young people come up and speak out is because we know that this is the countries like we live and we love, and we want this country to be better. And now, if we don't speak up, then no one will help us. And it's time for us to speak up for ourselves.
Tai Ji Men's representative Peng Zhugang issued a statement that emphasizes the organization's mission of peace.
25年的洗冤之路。 太极门师徒不曾停止走向世界的脚步，持续将爱与良心的和平文化推广至全球5大洲，超过上百个国家，以一颗修行人的心，坚持真理，绝不妥协，更以爱国家、爱世人的心，投身台湾法税改革与良心教育。
At the event, Tim Gao, an AWC human rights observer, read a letter that was sent to President Tsai Ing-wen that was co-signed by 25 international human rights experts and scholars about the Tai Ji Men case.
世界正在关注太极门案，因为这彰显年轻的民主国家在转型过程中是否愿意捍卫基本人权与宗教信仰自由，并对过去的错误补偿与反省。 太极门案是过去时代的产物，当时台湾的宗教信仰自由仍未获得充分的尊重。然而，对太极门案的迫害行动，让人怀疑过去威权时代的问题是否已经完全解决了。
2021 culminates a year of Tai Ji Men fighting for justice throughout the world, both in person and online, as well as a total of 25 years of trying to resolve its case with the Taiwan government. Tai Ji Men will continue its fight in the new year until the case is resolved.